Test, test.
Welcome back to What the Hype, y'all. Micah and I are here this week to recap the latest episode of The White Lotus, season 3, episode 6. Huge episode, right, Micah? A lot of setup here, but also a lot of consequences.
Definitely. And it's funny because I can't talk about this show without laughing from time to time just because of all the things that happen. But where would you like to start? I feel like we traditionally start with the rat lifts, but
Well, it's funny because we kind of started there this episode too,
we did.
right?
Hmm.
So perfect. We basically pick up kind of where we left off. It's the morning after the full moon
It was
festival.
one hell of a party for most people.
Yeah, actually, one of the one of the first shots of the episode is a full moon, um, and that is Saxon waking up to seeing his brother's bare ass
Hmm.
in the same bed as him, which is obviously alarming. And as his memories come back over the course of the episode, it's extremely alarming. And I think all of us were Saxon in the way he reacted because we were like, yeah, I'm there with you, buddy. That's awful.
Yeah, and we're really taken on a journey throughout the entire course of the episode with both Saxon and Lachlan and their ability to fully recall what has transpired the prior night. Now, I think it's fair to say that Saxon remembers a fair bit more than he lets on, but it's clear not until the very end of the episode that Lachlan didn't remember anything. It took him being in a meditative state for his mind to clear, for him to get pretty much the full picture as to what was going on the prior night.
Yeah. And I remember last week you and I chatted after we did our reaction, and there was a fan theory that Lachlan had maybe like spit out the drugs that he'd been given. But to be
Yeah.
honest, I mean, I think you pointed out he drank a ton too, so that would be enough on its own. But yeah, it was just interesting to see that he was really the one who had no clear memory of it, even if Saxon was like heavily in denial, which, by the way, denial's name of the episode.
Oh,
Yeah.
didn't
So
know that.
yeah, very fitting. Um, but I will say, and it is a little bit jumping ahead for me here to like jump straight to the brothers. There's another Ratcliffe that we start with, and it starts out with quite a bang.
Yeah, good old Timothy
Mm-hmm.
is, as you said, we really do pick up where the prior episode left off from the standpoint of Timothy in just kind of inside of his own head, right? He's imagining again what would happen if he were to go ahead and take his own life. And at the tail end of the last episode, because Victoria comes in, we're left believing that Timothy is actually fine for the as much as one can be in that kind of a situation. But I think where I'm going is that we were led to believe because Victoria intervened that Timothy had a change of heart. But clearly, based on this opening scene, he hasn't. And it's actually, if you're a viewer, you're saying to yourself, well, hold on a second. Like, is this how they're opening up episode 6? And we were just kind of misguided at the end of last episode.
Yeah, so I found myself uncertain at the start of the episode. When it happened, I was like, no way. But then I was also like, it's Mike White. I mean, they might do that. It feels like something they would do. Um, but ultimately I'm glad we at least get him for a little while longer. It
It,
clearly seems like Timothy is a self-harm risk, and it makes me wonder, is he who we see floating face down?
Could
at the
be.
start of episode one. Um, we'll have to keep an eye on it. Yeah, he's not well.
Well, not only am I concerned for him, I'm concerned now for his family based on his state of
Mm-hmm.
mind, based on the conversation he had with Victoria, and then the vision he has of murdering his wife and then taking his own life, and based on the conversation he had with the Buddhist monk, which honestly, like, great advice, but not the right time for Timothy to be getting this advice.
No, as a matter of fact, he's seeking comfort for wanting to commit murder, suicide at the very least, but murder at the worst.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see how altered Timothy is at this point, too, because anytime there's a point of view shot from Timothy's point of view, the edges of the frame are cloudy and like very like twinkly looking. It's very clear that he is popping them lorazepams. Like I don't know what he's doing or how large of a supply Victoria had, but he's going to town on them.
Mm-hmm. Well, Victoria clearly has enough for herself because she pops one again in this episode, which is the first
Mm-hmm.
time I think we've seen her take it in a few episodes. Which good for her if she's able
Yeah.
to detox a little bit. But I am very concerned now for, at the bare minimum, Timothy. I did want to go back to something you said last week when we were talking about Victoria. I am getting more and more confident that she does have a backup plan. Just again, based on the conversation that she was having with Timothy, she tells him, of course, that she really wouldn't want to live like this, or she wouldn't want to continue living if she didn't have all of life's luxuries available to her, which I think you can interpret on a couple levels. Obviously, he takes it to the extreme, but to me that might also suggest that she has a plan in place, that she's done her due diligence to ensure that she and maybe her kids are secure moving forward.
Yeah. And I think you're onto something there because she's very confident when she reassures Timothy all the time, it's going to be okay. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be fine. Yes, it will.
Right.
And I agree. That leads me to believe she's got like a break glass in case of emergencies, planned some kind of ripcord to get them out of this.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me, again, think that she knows more about what's going on with him than he knows that she
Right.
knows.
And let's be real, there's a major problem now for Timothy if he does want to go about taking his own life, because Guy Talk came into their hotel room while they were all away and found the gun that Timothy stole from him a couple episodes ago.
Can we talk about that moment for a second, please? I thought it was, I was like, wow, what luck. It's this giant chest of drawers, and the first drawer Guy Talk opens happens to be the one the
Well,
gun
in
is in.
fairness, he searched pretty much the entire. I don't
Yeah,
even.
yeah,
I
yeah,
wouldn't call
that's
it a
true.
room, suite, compound, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it was. He was doing quite a bit of searching, but yeah, what are the chances that maybe karma intervened a little bit and he selected the right drawer?
Perhaps. Yeah. And I mean, he even passes Timothy and Victoria walking away from their little villa. And it's very clear that Timothy notices, but what's he going to do at this point? But Guy Talk needs the gun because he's going to go out shooting tonight so he can actually learn how to use it.
Hmm.
I
And
thought
he's a
this
very good shot, by
he
the way.
he is a very good shot, and I thought it was interesting because it was noted that he was a pretty good shot for his first time. And with this show, I always catch little things like that, and I'm like, is it the first time?
Right.
We don't
And
know.
the question was posed to Guy Talk as well. You're very good in this environment, but when shit gets real, how steady will your hand actually be? So I was wondering, is that a bit of foreshadowing to what's to come in the finale?
Definitely. And it made me kind of curious too about what's the job description for being like in a guardhouse for this resort? And I mean, this could just be me speaking from a place of ignorance. I don't know. But like, why would someone in that position need to be prepared to kill people?
Yeah. Well, I
I
think
have
a
some
lot of it
questions.
stems from the robbery and wanting to
Yeah.
protect the hotel and its guests. But I do agree with you. Generally, the hotel security, at least the hotels I've stayed at, I haven't stayed at one as nice as the White Lotus, but generally they are not armed. So that is certainly questionable.
Yeah. I'm interested to see how that's going to go. Yeah. So
Well, we're done
who
with the rat
yeah.
lifts, right? We don't want to
I
talk
think
about
I
it.
think we're done with the rat lifts for now, but I mean tangentially we're going to end up touching back on them again because of some other goings on this
Mhm.
episode.
Well, yeah, let's talk a little bit about what happened on the boat. And we talked last time about how what went down initially last episode between, and when I say last episode, I mean 2 episodes ago, between Lachlan and Saxon was Lachlan just finally letting his guard down, maybe exerting a little bit of dominance over his brother, which he's probably felt pressure from for most of his life. Things go to a whole nother level, though, when the full moon is out.
Yeah.
And look, Saxon did say it's all about the pump, and he got plenty of
Oh
pump from his brother.
no. It was so terrible.
It
The
was speciy, speciy, right? That's what he wanted.
Oh my god. The level of like like
Hmm.
gag reflex. I was just like, "Oh, disgusting."
Well,
When the camera angle, and the camera angles in this show are always so fucking deliberate. When the camera angle shifted and you saw what Lachlan was doing, I was like, "Oh my god, this is
because at the beginning
awful."
of the episode, you're led to believe that it's Saxon doing it on his own,
Right.
which in and of itself probably would have been a lot for him to handle. But the fact that it was Lachlan
Yeah.
who was assisting him in his needs.
Terrible. It's very I don't know. Let me know how you feel about this. It felt clear to me by the end of the episode that whatever it was Saxon was trying to put down for Lachlan, Lachlan interpreted it differently than Saxon intended.
Hmm.
Like I don't think that Saxon necessarily intended for things to go the way that they did. But in retrospect, I think it's clear to see why Lachlan was confused, especially given the family dynamic and how screwed up it is.
Yeah, I feel like we're gonna continue to get more from Lachlan. I feel like he's been unlocked, no, or maybe pun intended, at this point.
Unlachlan.
And I do think, again, you could look at this as a moment where he is exerting a level of dominance over his brother, and he doesn't recall it now until the very end of the episode. But where do we think now this goes? Because it's clear that Saxon remembers. He has a little bit of help from Chloe and Chelsea.
Uh, which cringe.
Well, I'm saying
Yeah.
they help him remember what happened the prior night.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see the dynamic shift with somebody like Saxon, who comes into this show very much the dominant alpha male. And in this episode, you can tell he is very much not. He is very, just in a state of disbelief, but probably has been knocked down quite a few pegs from going back to the earlier episodes of the season.
Oh yeah, he's panicking.
Hmm.
He's panicking, and I mean, geez, his mind's probably running a million miles an hour about what that means for him and like his concepts of manliness or
Mm-hmm.
manhood. If it were to get out, what that could mean for his career and for his family. So, this is also something we should be keeping an eye on too, because this is another person who's being put in a very desperate position. And if we're thinking about who in this cast of characters has some kind of motivation to put someone face down in the water, could be
Mm-hmm.
Saxon.
Definitely. One thing that I had read online shortly after the episode, and I didn't pick up on it. I don't know if you did, but after the events of the night prior, when they are getting out of bed, Saxon actually puts on Lachlan's swim trunks, and Lachlan puts on Saxon's swim trunks, and there's definitely some symbolism there.
Yeah, I saw a TikTok about this actually, which so gross. And I think it just speaks to something more rotten at the core of the Ratcliffe family. You even get some of this in Timothy's conversation with the monk, right? Where the monk is like, hey, a lot of young people from your country come here because they're in a crisis of spirit, and you're too focused on the material and on chasing wealth and, any other pleasure that you could imagine, that you're losing your connection to yourself and it makes you miserable.
Mm,
And I mean, that's the Ratcliffe family in a nutshell.
yeah, absolutely. One other popular fan theory that I've seen out there, and I'm wondering if you've come across this at all on TikTok, is the smoothies, right? The blender. The blender keeps coming up. It does not in every episode, but it's in a decent amount of them. And we go back to episode 1 where Saxon picks up the forbidden fruit, right? We learn that it's actually
Mm-hmm.
poisonous. And now that Timothy doesn't have a gun at his disposal, I'm wondering, could that be a potential angle? Maybe not for the entire family, but certainly for somebody like Timothy to to off himself by death by smoothie. I don't know.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because I recently went back and rewatched episode 1 just to be like, okay, what clues might I pick up on from episode 1 now that I've seen the first 6? And that moment stood out to me when Saxon picked up the fruit and was warned, don't eat that, the seeds are quite toxic, and he was like, oh cool, like he was way too excited about that.
Mm.
So, yeah, could Timothy use it? But also, like,
Could Saxon?
could Saxon use
It
it?
doesn't seem like something Timothy would readily recall, but
Yeah.
Saxon, perhaps because he was the one who picked up the fruit, maybe he comes across it again in the next 2 episodes, which we have left. Now, it seems just like Saxon is in a right state. Lachlan is off at the monastery. He's spending the night with Piper, who was told by Victoria that she needed to do a trial run essentially at the monastery. If you can hang out for the night, then we'll let you stay here for the next year. All right. We mentioned earlier how Lachlan, he remembers everything that happened the night before. What is this setting up? Are we headed towards a confession here where Lachlan is going to tell Piper what's happened?
I don't know. I see a lot of theories thinking that Lachlan might try to make a move on Piper.
Oh, he's going for round 2.
I don't know if I like that. I think for the narrative's sake, I think I would like it better if Lachlan talk to his sister about what happened, because Piper is already, she's kind of a powder keg. She's already primed to blow up the family dynamic. She's the person who is most readily you know, available to step forward and say this is a bunch of bullshit and you people are fake. I want to go to the opposite side of the planet to get away from you.
Hmm.
So that's kind of where I see it going more so. But I think Lachlan is very confused. And I think there might be other dynamics at play that we haven't necessarily seen
There,
fully play out.
right. It's clear the relationship between Lachlan and Piper is much closer
Mm-hmm.
than either of them are with Saxon.
Agreed.
So, and I think why there's been a lot of talk on social media about, does Lachlan go for seconds is because he's shirtless on the bed with Piper. They're having a conversation in the preview for the next episode. And, people are probably just basing off of, well, what happened last week? Could we be getting more of that in episode 7? And who knows? I mean, that's the thing about White Lotus. You never know what's going to happen, but I don't know ultimately though where that would take us if it was more of what happened between him and Saxon. I do think maybe there's like a just complete purge of Lachlan, like him spilling everything to Piper. Maybe Piper shares something with Lachlan, and because Piper seems like, aside maybe from Chelsea, just like the purest of
Mm-hmm.
individuals on this season. And I think we talked about this a couple of episodes ago, but Piper's journey is very reminiscent of, I think it was Quinn in season 1, where
Yeah.
he ultimately makes the decision to stay in Hawaii, or he kind of runs away from his family when they're boarding the plane. I don't know. He probably got yelled at and had to come home, but let's just say like it's she has like that kind of similar free spirit to him. And I don't know that enough of Piper has been developed to like take her down that road of, making out with Lachlan or
Yeah, I
more than
don't.
that.
Yeah, I honestly, that's why I say I don't really like if that's the direction it goes, I don't know that I'm going to care for it very much because it like okay, where do you go from there? Like what's the next step at that point? Whereas I feel like the relationship between the two of them feels like it would much more organically lead to conversations and revelations happening about what happened and then Piper losing her mind because she definitely will. And maybe Lachlan stays with her in Thailand at the monastery
Maybe.
and everyone else goes to jail. I don't know.
Assuming they all survive.
Yeah.
But I do agree with that. And I think the whole situation that played out with Saxon really was more about Lachlan being able to finally break out of his shell and exert a certain level of dominance over his brother. There's certainly other ways to go about it, but yeah. Um,
Yeah.
in terms of where we go from here,
I think Gary.
Gary, there's
Because
a
yeah,
party at Gary's place.
there is a party at Gary's place, and Saxon and Lachlan are invited. He knows what happened
Hmm.
between Chloe and them, and he doesn't seem immediately angry in the
No.
moment, but I will be honest, I am kind of worried for their lives. This invitation to his house party does not feel like a warm invite.
It's clear that he wants all these people in his home for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not sure what that reason is. And I would be worried for anybody that he invites to his house because we know his track record.
Yeah. Well, he's also invited Belinda, whose son Zion has arrived
Hmm.
as well, and we'll get to his arrival here in a
What an
moment.
arrival for,
But
I
oh,
mean,
I know. Poor kid.
yeah.
But it's very clear that Gary has it out for at least a couple of the people coming to this party. I don't know if it's a way to easily try to poison people somehow
Hmm.
or if it's an easier way to get people alone and away, of course, I think it would be more Gary's style, or rather, gosh, what's his real name?
Greg.
Greg. Thank you. I was like, Greg. It's more Greg's style
Gabe is
to,
next season
yeah.
if he survives, which I think he's going to.
Yeah, I think he's the through line for sure. But I feel like it's more his style to like hire trained assassins to take care of his dirty business for him. So
Hmm.
maybe this is an intimidation tactic. Next week's going to be crazy though.
I can see it as being a bit of an intimidation tactic, and because he even says to Chloe, "I need your help with something." So what is it specifically that he needs her help with? Is it just getting Saxon to come to this party? And a lot of the events have actually been focused around Gary's properties, right? We were on the yacht. Now we're going to his home. As far as Belinda goes, I think he's going to make her an offer. I think that he's going to say, look, I'm going to bankroll your spa, but you have to keep quiet and not tattle on me to the Italian authorities. And there could be fallout depending on what decision she makes.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a really good guess, Micah. And I think she's going to be super tempted because of what Porn Shy, that's his name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because of what Porn Shy
That's
says
actually
to her.
Lachlan's new name.
God. Because of what he says to her, kind of, the morning after their lovemaking and they're behind the concierge desk. And he says to her, hey, I know it's always been your dream to have your own spa. We could open one together here in Thailand. And you can kind of tell she's conflicted, I think, because he's excited about it. And I think that she doesn't hate the idea, but I
No,
also don't think that she wants to live in Thailand.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
He does talk about how it would be a lot easier for them to do it there. So I'm curious to see how this all unfolds. And again, if folks haven't seen the preview for episode 7, Zion is the one who actually says to Belinda, let's hear what he has to say. So they're definitely going to be going to this party. And I do think that's where we're headed. Some kind of deal is going to be put on the table, and it's going to be up to Belinda to make that decision. And depending on what she decides, it could put her at a lot of risk.
Yeah. I feel like she's too good and wholesome to take any deal about this. Also, what would happen in the last episode if she took the deal? You know what I mean? So I think she's going to reject it
Mm,
ultimately.
all right.
Yeah.
Now,
We'll
what would
see.
be the reasoning to bring Saxon to this party? I don't think that Greg Gary cares all that much about what's gone on between him and Chloe or between Lachlan and Chloe. Unless he's got more at play here, like that maybe he wants to blackmail him based on what's happened. How does Timothy factor into all this potentially? Like, I think it's clear that maybe Greg is picking up on the fact that Timothy's having some trouble. It wouldn't probably be that hard for him to find out information on the Ratliffs and what might be going on with Timothy's financial situation back in the States.
Yeah, I agree because eh, Great Gary already knows that Saxon and Lachlan are Timothy's sons, right?
Hmm.
So,
He met them. Yep.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I could totally see him confronting Timothy and saying, hey, I know about what's going on. And I don't see him trying to blackmail him for money. I don't think he needs money. But I could see him twisting his arm to help with some even more nefarious black market affairs since Timothy is already kind of in the hole.
Yep.
I could definitely see Great Gary being like, let's plunge a little deeper, shall we?
Yeah. So we can expect to head over to Gary's house in episode 7. I mean, we've been there a couple times. We're going to spend a lot of time there. It seems like in the next episode. And who knows who else might show up? Chelsea's been invited. Unclear if Rick will be available to join her. What
Yeah,
do
I
we
think.
make of that situation?
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you about that scene. It's the closing scene where Rick enters Sritala's. Is that how I'm saying? Is that correct? Sritala?
Shritala, yeah.
Sritala enters her home and she introduces her husband who is coming down the stairs, but the shot is intentionally pretty blurry, so you
Mm-hmm.
can't see who it is.
Right.
What did you make of that?
Well, first off, what kind of security does Shritala and Jim Hollinger have? Because number one, no background research was done here on the Hollywood producer to actually make sure he's a Hollywood producer. And number two, Rick has a gun on him and they don't pat him down. They're
I
just
think
cool with it.
I think they already know what he's up to
Oh,
because I just think about that scene where
and
she and Rick are at the restaurant
yeah,
discussing and she was kind of playing along with him. Like even saying things like, "Well, why would you bring me all the way here if he just wanted to go to my house?"
right. And
It
what a strange request to go to your house.
Yeah, and to be down with it.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think that she also knows more about what Rick's doing. I think we have a bunch of people in this show that think they're slick,
And they're not.
and they're not. That's the upshot.
Well, lots to see what happens. I mean, we'll have to wait and see what happens with Rick and Jim, who, as you said, we only get a shot of his legs. We don't see his face yet. So assuming we're going to get a reveal next week, and I know on a couple of episodes ago we did talk about the theory that seems to be pretty popular now that Jim likely is Rick's father. That would be a pretty
Hmm.
big twist for Rick.
Yeah.
What do we think the likelihood of that is? Is it now too popular of a theory so it's not going to happen? And I just I feel like that would add a little bit more to this whole dynamic where Rick is going there to kill this guy. And if it turns out that it is his father, the likelihood of him doing that, it goes way, way down, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it seems like he's not even being honest with himself about what he wants to accomplish here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sometimes he wants to kill him, sometimes he wants to just tell him he ruined his life. Um, Another fan theory that I saw, and I think I saw someone leave it in the comments, and I'm not sure. I would really have to think about it, and think about like how it would work with the story. But there is a fan theory that Sritala is actually Rick's father who went through
Wow.
gender affirming care in Thailand and that Rick's father was Thai. I don't know what the feasibility of that theory is, but it would definitely be a really big twist.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly feel like it's more likely that it's just Jim, but this is something that I've seen some people who like really go down the rabbit hole talking about.
Yeah. Well, look, nothing is out of the realm of possibility on this show.
No.
So I think all fan theories are good fan theories until we get that finale. But I'm going to stick with it likely being Jim. And look, we
Mm,
know from the stories that we've heard thus far that Jim is not well. And so, how is that potentially going to play into these last few episodes? If in fact this is Rick's father, could this be like the last few days, weeks, months that he gets the opportunity to spend with him?
Right.
Assuming he doesn't off him.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we'll have to see what happens there and what goes down with these Ratcliffe kids. It's so funny to me that Victoria is like uber focused on worrying about the child that she should probably be the least worried about. Um, that was another great irony that stuck out at me from this episode. So it'll be interesting to see how they all interact at Gary's party. Also, there's going to be, I feel like there was this slight mention that Fabian was having all the employees to the hotel dinner
Yeah.
on the same night as Gary's party, I think, because he was going to sing.
Yeah, I remember
So
that.
I don't know if there's going to be
That's the
things going
pregame.
down in both locales,
Yeah,
but we'll see.
Fabian's the pregame, and then Gary's the actual party.
Well, I don't think Fabian is invited to Gary's house.
Look, we were talking about this on the last podcast. I think it's possible that Fabian is in Gary's pocket.
Yeah, totally. But not invited to his house. I could
Probably not.
definitely see Gary being like, "You're the guy I pay off to do
Right.
my bidding. You're not invited to my house."
Yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe saying he's in his pocket, given the this episode, is probably not the best thing, best analogy. But so the only group we really haven't talked about at all, and I think that's there's a good reason.
Because we don't care about them.
Yeah,
The three, I literally at one point I couldn't remember what their names were, and I like was writing notes, and I was like, "Bitch one told bitch two."
Jacqueline, Kate, and
Yeah,
Lori.
and I don't care about this like petty mean girl shit. I'm sure it's still gonna end up being consequential. Like they will be woven into whatever major plot reveal happens because of whatever's going on with Valentin and all of his friends. But I agree, they are the least interesting. I don't care about them.
Right. And it looks like Lori is going to go off to the fight with Valentin and his friends. And there's
Mm-hmm.
actually a shot of her like running down a street or running down an alleyway in the preview for the next episode. So I'm curious what happens there. And obviously, not a good thing for her to be out on her own in the streets of Thailand at night. So who knows what her future holds. But yeah, this episode for them, I mean, the tattling on Jacqueline hooking up with Valentin, I mean, I guess really only served the purpose of putting two of them at odds with each other.
Yeah, I mean, they've always been. That's the whole dynamic here is that they all secretly hate each other, but they don't really have other friends. So it's like a frenemy trio situation.
And with,
Stupid.
and I guess Kate got what she wanted, right? Which was for them really just to not be doing much more of anything. Like she seems like
Yeah.
she's very content just to be back at the hotel and not go out and party. And so we have a little bit of a tiff now going on between these three. And like we've said, this storyline just isn't doing it for me. Now, what are our thoughts though as they kind of wrap up this season on the White Lotus? Is there going to be kind of a coming together of sorts? Like, is there going to be something that bonds the three of them back with each other versus maybe separating them to the point where they want nothing to do with each other anymore?
It does feel like they are setting them up for some kind of um, togetherness resolution. Kind of reminds me of what we saw with certain characters in season one as well, who, really seemed like towards the end of the season, they were primed to be on the outs forever and they ultimately come back together. Um, I think that's what'll happen with these three women, but I think they'll just continue on being like very selfish and vapid
Yeah.
and just pretend none of this ever happened. I think that's probably how they've addressed prior conflicts in their friendship.
Yeah.
I don't think much of them. No,
Uh,
no hate to the actresses though; they're great.
yeah, they're great. And maybe that's part of, the message that's trying to be sent is just maybe people don't care about these types of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care enough to invest the time to analyze or talk more about what's going on. But any other characters we didn't spend time talking about?
I mean, we didn't get to talk too much about poor Zion walking in on his mother, waking up the morning after her lovemaking session. But I actually thought I thought it was actually kind of cute the way they addressed it as a mother and a son to be like, oh, this is awkward. You're going to hold this over my head forever, but not to dwell on it, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, and it's clear that Zion is going to be a little bit of a balance for Belinda, and him coming here obviously puts more of a target on Belinda because now she has extended family who are in Thailand and could be potentially somebody that Greg goes after. But I also think it gives her another layer of protection at the same time. So it could kind of go uh, both ways. Um, I
Yeah.
think him being there ultimately will be a good thing.
I think so too. I think we're going to learn more about him next episode. It's very clear that he's going through something. He's kind of trying to share with Belinda at breakfast that he feels like all he does is study and that he doesn't really have a life.
Mm,
Outside of that, we know that he's struggling with a lot of anxiety as well from what we see in episode 1. So it'll be interesting to see what more unfolds there with Zion's story and what was really the motivation for him to come all the way to Thailand.
right. Especially so early in Belinda's stay, too. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it just aligns with something where he's on a break from school, but
Yeah, but they could have mentioned that, right? Like
yeah.
if it was just a coincidence, oh, he happened to be off, fine. But
And
it seems like there's something more at play
mhm.
here.
So, as we are kind of wrapping this up, I don't know that we're any closer to figuring out who the individual in the Lotus pool is.
I will say, yesterday I paused it and I turned my screen brightness up all the way and got very close to it and looked at it. I think it's a male character just based on the way the person's hair looks, and they have hair, so it's not Gary.
Damn.
Um, and that's kind of just the style of the cut and the length of the hair makes me think one of the male characters might be more of a prime target here, but
Hmm.
you'll have to look at it next time you watch and pause and like really look at it and tell me what you think.
The funny thing is, I haven't seen it online very much. I've looked for it, and that video is very hard to come by. So I think I will have to go back and actually watch and pause the episode. But, and look, it doesn't mean, though, that, first off, it doesn't mean that just because the body is floating, it's dead, right? We said
Yep,
that. And it doesn't mean that that's the only dead body, if in fact
100%.
we could be looking at a number of things happening just based on the conversation that we had here today. And it's hard for me to make a pick. I think maybe after episode 7, we're going to have to
Yeah.
make our picks and see what happens in the
Yeah, we're gonna have
finale.
to make our final selection, see where it goes. Well, we would love to hear from all of y'all watching at home who you predict is floating face down in the Lotus pool. So please do be sure to comment below on YouTube or email us at whatthehypepodcast@gmail.com and let us know what you think. We are a new show, so any follows, any comments, any engagement that you can give us really helps us out. We are What the Hype Podcast on all the socials and would really appreciate you following us on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch. But that is all for this week. We will be back next week to react to episode 7, the penultimate episode of the season. Micah,
Yeah.
thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, this was fun.
Awesome. Thanks so much, y'all. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Alrighty.
All right.
Easy peasy.
Are we sure we don't want to